In this video, so you can really hear how that upper structure triad opens things up when you have that D flat minor chord on top of the C7 that we talked about earlier, how balanced that is and how colorful that is. It'd be akin to if you were a painter, not only discovering a new color, but how to create new colors. What's up YouTube, mDecks Music here, and thanks for joining us on our new series dedicated to piano voicings, specifically piano voicings that use upper structures. Included in the description below is a link to our website where you'll find a reading list and a free PDF of all the content that we're going to discuss in the series. It is said that the average piano player spends 2 to 3 hours daily searching for cool voicings over different chords and harmonic progressions. Finding new voicings, cataloging, memorizing, and playing them in all 12 keys is not an easy task. Let me show you the concept of building chords using upper structures, how to think of them, how to find them, and most importantly, how to practice them so that you can add this very unique color to your musical palette. Okay, so what are upper structures? Upper structures can create rich, complex, yet incredibly balanced chord voicings. The concept is quite simple. You play the basic sound of the chord on the left hand and a triad or chordal or some other simple structure on the right hand. The structure on your right hand is called an upper structure if it contains at least one tension. We'll explain what tensions are later in the video. When playing using upper structures, the trick is not to think in terms of just a chord, but rather a chord and a chord scale pairing. So what is a chord scale pairing? Simply put, a chord and a scale is a chord scale pairing if they both share the same root and the chord is contained inside the scale. For example, a C major 7 chord and a C Ionian mode or major scale is a chord scale pairing, but also C major 7 and the C Lydian mode is a chord scale pairing. If a chord in a progression is playing the role of a specific harmonic function, then there probably is a best chord scale to pair with it. If a C major 7 is the 1, then the best chord scale for it is Ionian. If C major 7 is the 4, then Lydian would be a better option. Otherwise, any chord scale pairing is fair game when one is creating voicings. So how is the chord scale pairing concept useful? And how do we apply it to upper structures? A chord scale pairing will yield a bigger set of notes than a regular chord. C major 7 is 4 notes, C, E, G, and B. C Ionian is 7 notes. A chord scale pairing allows any note in the chromatic scale to be thoroughly classified into one of several categories. The two main categories are outside notes and inside notes. Outside notes, as the name implies, are notes outside the chord scale, and inside notes are notes in the chord scale. Inside notes can be further classified into chord tones and tensions. Chord tones being notes in the chord and tensions being notes in the chord scale, but not in the chord itself. We can further subcategorize chord tones and tensions into even smaller groups. For example, chord tones can be further classified into root, the root of the chord, guide tones, the notes that contain the essence of the sound, the 3rd and the 7th, also altered fifths, other chord tones, non-root and non-guide tones that don't add much to the basic sound of the chord. And tensions can be further classified into avoids. These are notes that create too much tension in the voicing and usually destroy the overall sound of the chord. Usually avoids are a flat 9 above a guide tone. Non-avoids. These are notes that add color without destroying the chord's overall sound. So now when you see a chord symbol, don't just think of the notes in that chord, but also the notes in the chord scale that you're going to pair it with. For example, here's a C7 chord in When I Fall in Love. It is the 5-7 of 2, and the best chord scale will be Mixolydian flat 9, flat 13. The chord scale pairing I will use is a C7 and a C Mixolydian flat 9, flat 13. All the notes from the Mixolydian flat 9, flat 13 are my inside notes. The chord tones are C, E, G, and B flat. The root is C. The guide tones are E and B flat. The tensions are D flat, F, and A flat. F is an avoid tension because it creates a flat 9 interval with one of the guide tones. And D flat and A flat are allowed tensions. So can you find, let's say, a minor triad inside of the C7 C Mixolydian flat 9 pairing that contains at least one tension? If you said D flat minor triad, you are correct. The notes in the D flat minor triad all belong to the Mixolydian flat 9 flat 13. D flat and A flat are non-avoid tensions, and F flat, which is the same note as E, is a guide tone. Which brings me to an important point in the video. In our example, D flat major, made up of D flat, F, and A flat, was the obvious triad to be found over the second degree of Mixolydian flat 9 flat 13. If we didn't look carefully, we would have missed that D flat, E, A flat is also a triad, since E is the enharmonic of F flat, and D flat, F flat, A flat is the D flat minor triad. That's why it's better to look at scales and chords as graphs over the circle of fifths. If you haven't seen our videos on the circle of fifths, I would recommend you watch them because they show you how incredibly powerful the circle of fifths is. Let me show you the C7 C Mixolydian flat 9 flat 13 pairing inside of Tessitura Pro that uses the circle of fifths to study and understand scales and modes. So here's a view with chord tones versus tensions. Now if we drag a minor triad inside the Mixolydian flat 9 flat 13, we can see all possible ways that it fits. Tessitura now finds all possible minor triads inside the Mixolydian flat 9 flat 13, and there are 3. On the flat 2, which is D flat minor, which is the one we found already. Another one on the flat 7, which is B flat minor, inside the C Mixolydian flat 9 flat 13. And one more on the 4, which is F minor, inside the C Mixolydian flat 9 flat 13. If we look at each of the triads individually, we can see that the B flat minor triad contains one chord tone, the flat 7, and 2 tensions, the flat 9 and the 11. But that 11 is an avoid tension because it creates a flat 9 with the third of the chord, and that destroys the sound quality of the chord. The F minor triad has the same problem, and the D flat minor is perfect. As you can see, Tessitura is showing the D flat minor triad as D flat, E, and A flat in the graph because it's using the circle of fifths based on the pairing C7, C Mixolydian flat 9, flat 13. And since we'll be using the D flat minor triad as an upper structure, positioning it above and separate from the basic sound of the chord, we will create a dual sound which will be balanced and pleasant to the ears. See, triads are very recognizable. They have their own cool sound, and putting them up there apart from the other notes helps to conserve the original sound. So now we have the basic sound of the C7 chord on the left by using the root and the 2 guide tones, the 3rd and the 7th, and the cool sound of the minor triad on top, which we can still hear clearly and blends perfectly with the C7 chord, since we have chosen it using a chord-scale pairing. Isn't that cool? Let's play a few measures of When I Fall in Love using that D flat minor triad on top of the C7 chord. So you can really hear how that upper structure triad opens things up when you have that D flat minor chord on top of the C7 that we talked about earlier, how balanced that is and how colorful that is. It'd be akin to if you were a painter, not only discovering a new color, but how to create new colors. Now, let's try the D flat major triad on top of the C7. Yeah, and you can hear how in this context that really just does not work. And that's because of this interval right there, that flat 9 we've been talking about a lot. Of course, there's a flat 9 between the C and the D flat, and between the G and the A flat. But the E is the 3rd in the chord, a guide tone, and its purpose in life is wanting to resolve to that F. When you play that F in the voicing, you're already fulfilling E's purpose, and the soul of the dominant chord is no more.
Throughout the series, we're going to keep exploring upper structure triads, how to use them, how to find them, why they work, and all that good stuff. Don't forget to get the Jazz Piano Chord Voicings collection. It includes all possible upper structure triads and chordals over minor seventh and dominant chords, individually and in a 2 minor 7 5 7 progression. There are 3 volumes with charts showing the upper structures classified by tensions and avoid notes, circle of fifths graphs, and exercises in every key for every single upper structure triad and chordal. It's just like having a new palette of colors to paint with for the rest of your life. As usual, we appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.